Welcome to our 7 p.m. Wednesday Bible study, One Nation Under God, Healing Racial Divides, and we begin with prayer. Heavenly Father, we look to you and need your help. What's going on in the world and close around us and in our hearts is beyond us. There exists in each of us things that we wish weren't there, sins that we wish weren't there, racial feelings of distrust and racial inequity towards others that we wish weren't there. Use this Bible study to give us a glimpse of what we should be in your love, what we can be as you work in our hearts and our minds, what you desire us to be. Help us to see what's there and confess and repent and understand better how to be your church in this world that is upset and full of unrest and full of sin, full of hate, full of the devil's work. Help us to work for you. We have these things on our heart, Lord, that we'd like to unburden so we can better study your word and concentrate on it. We lift up our sister, Naomi Jones, and Rita as she worries about her. We understand she possibly was in the presence of someone with COVID-19. We ask that she is not infected, that you would keep her healthy. And you would watch over her, keep her from being upset, give her strength, give her assurance, be with her as she is unable to do some of the things that she likes to do. We ask that you would be with Beverly, who is hospitalized and in critical condition with heart problems. Come upon her and bring her health and healing, Lord. Be with Norma's neighbor, Lori, who has inoperable and aggressive cancer. We ask that you would bring your healing upon her. You can heal, Lord. But whatever your will is, help Lori's family and she herself understand and accept your will at this time and trust in you in faith. Be with our brother Ron as he has a heart procedure coming up. We ask that it would go well and it would work to restore his natural rhythm in his heart and restore him to complete health. Be with Connie's friend Karen and especially her daughter Christine, who's hospitalized with COVID-19. We ask that you would bring healing upon her. We're thankful that they discovered it in time so she's not on a ventilator, but carry her through this and heal her from that disease. Be with Pastor Neish's family as they mourn his passing, all the congregations that he served and all those that were close to him. Be with them as they mourn. Be with the family of Jim Bell, who passed away on Monday, that they would have the hope of the resurrection and the peace and love of Jesus Christ, of you, Lord, in their hearts. We give thanksgiving, Lord, for all who have recovered from health issues, including myself. Lord, thank you for healing me. Thank you for the work you've done on my foot, for protecting me from COVID-19. I ask that protection and healing would continue. And for all of us, Lord, our entire congregation, protect us from COVID-19 so that we can continue to do ministry here. And finally, Lord, be with Karen and Ron and all the things they have to do around their house to put in new carpet. Help them not to work too hard and hurt themselves, and keep them united in holy matrimony and faith and love. Be with us now as we turn to your word and turn to this study. Give us an understanding we did not have before. Help us to listen to each other with love and understanding, and move our hearts and minds. All this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, session 4. We are one in Christ. Somebody want to read the quote from Keith Haney at the top? And you know what? I will put this study on the screen.
Yeah, yes, I heard.
It's right here.
Anyone that can see that on their paper or on the screen, go ahead and read it.
I'll choose the paper.
Good.
Imagine living in a world where people saw you through the eyes of the Creator. They would marvel at the beauty of God's creation and not be preoccupied with the color of your skin.
Pretty interesting quote when you think about it. When you go back to God created all people, in Adam were all the genetics for all different colors and races of people were all in Adam, and also in Noah and his children. And we do have more in common than we have not in common. Would somebody like to read the memory verse?
There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is no or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you are Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to promise.
And somebody to read the objectives.
In this session, we will analyze the implications of Black Americans believing they cannot be prejudiced and discuss how the white American thought, "I don't see color," can actually increase distrust among Black Americans.
Does that raise your interest, those objectives?
Yes.
These are things that I didn't know about or wondered about. For this lesson, we're going to need a copy of the movie Remember the Titans. And I rented that. And it's on my computer. And God willing, we'll be able to watch it. You guys at home in Zoom land, the way this works is you'll hear it, but I don't believe you'll see it. It's a short clip. It doesn't last that long. Hearing will probably be enough. If you've never seen the movie, it's one that I would recommend you watch. It's a pretty good movie.
I've seen that, you know, Remember the Titans football.
Especially if you like football. But it's got a good lesson too. And it fits very
Yeah.
appropriately with our study here today. In the last session, we spoke about how we can start seeing all people as our neighbor, especially those of different culture or ethnic background. By showing them loving kindness as Christ Jesus has shown us, we can begin to provide positive life experiences that might help break down the general distrust that is dividing Black and white America. In this session, we will look at a false perception in Black America that makes it nearly impossible to bridge the divide in our country. That is the belief that Black Americans cannot be prejudiced. This session will help white participants understand how that belief arose and how it distorts their well-meaning efforts to improve relations. It will also encourage Black participants to examine their own beliefs and lean more upon God to overcome the painful life experiences which have divided them from their white neighbors. And that part about Black people not believing they're prejudiced, I didn't really think about it, but it makes sense now. And it helped me understand kind of some of their responses to us and to me. So let's turn the page. And would somebody like to read the introduction? If you like to read and you have a nice loud voice, you can go all the way down to reflective questions. If not, read as far as you can and we'll pass it off to somebody else.
Introduction. Insights on racial relations from the author. Before we get into what could unite us, we should first explore two more attitudes that are further dividing us. The first from Black America, the second from white America. Growing up as an African American, I was told by many Black people whom I respected that we really can't be prejudiced. Yes, you read that right. Many in the Black community feel it is impossible for them to discriminate. We all recognize discrimination when we see it. Treating one group of people differently simply because they are of a different skin color, age, or sex. It would certainly seem that Blacks are no more exempt from that than the whites or anybody else. However, far more African Americans believe they can't be prejudiced than you may realize. It stems from the notion that their ancestors were victims of exploitation and oppression from white Americans. Since they are descendants of a victimized, oppressed people, they feel they are not prejudiced when they lump all white people together or make judgments about what must be in a white person's heart. I know in writing this, I'm exposing an erroneous perception. No group of people is immune to the effects of sin, and to believe otherwise is a trick of the evil one. Because of this fundamental distortion of the truth, any discussion on race starts as one-sided conversation. Blacks who hold this view see white people as the ones with the prejudice problem. And since they have the problem, they are the ones who need to change. It's obvious this isn't helping the racial situation in America. But even worse, this assumption turns Black people into powerless victims. That is wrong. I hold the belief that whether one person or two create a problem, it takes both to seek reconciliation. While I acknowledge that history, Slavery and the pain of the Jim Crow segregation laws have made the divide deeper. We need both parties to work together to find a new pathway forward. The work of healing race in America is our problem, not a problem for those people. We need to work at this together. The racial divide in this country is ripping apart the fabric of the nation and putting us at risk of destroying ourselves and the freedom that so many of our ancestors bled and died to defend.
Would remind you again, look at the copyright at the bottom of your study. It was written in 2017. Could have been written today, couldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and reading through this morning on Good Morning America, they talked about the blacks and their prejudice within their own race of each other because they feel the lighter the skin, the more advanced they are. But then it did show also that if you're a light-skinned black person, your wages are usually higher than a darker skin, even though you do the same job.
Wow.
Very interesting. So they're prejudiced in their own race with each other according to their skin color.
We have reflection questions. So question number 1. In what way does this attitude increase the divide between black and white America?
Each one thinks they're right, and it doesn't come up with a solution. The white people think that they're right, the black people think they're right.
How about the black people feeling that they are not prejudiced? That it is good, right, and salutary that basically all white people hate black people or don't want to treat them equal?
That angers us because that's not true. But at the same time, we all have our own prejudice.
To make a relationship work, it takes both sides. You can't have a one-sided relationship in anything. So they would need to recognize and own part of that before anything could get better. Both sides.
I think the thing is too, like a lot of us get upset when we think about them saying, you know, we weren't the ones that put them in slavery. Not me. Ancestors maybe, but not me. And they're still dwelling on that like I did it. And that's upsetting to me.
Well, that's on German. You gonna blame me for what the Germans did way back?
Well,
when, you know?
and same for me, yeah. And then again, you know, I do know that on my husband's side of the family, his great grandfather was a slave auctioneer in Arkansas.
I think it doesn't help either side. You're already going into this with division already, white America, black America.
Yep.
You know, that's if we could get away from, you know, both sides, not looking at it as black America, white America, and looking at it as America, that might start taking away a lot of our issues. And, you know, it's a part of, and Faith's talking about something to share on Good Morning America. I seen this online, and, you know, and I recorded my phone. It's this, and I told Chrissy about this Navy SEAL admiral, and he says, he was a Navy SEAL, but he was an admiral. He says, SEAL training was a great equalizer. Nothing mattered but your will to succeed. Not your skin color, not your race, not your ethnic background, not your social status. And that's what we had to get back to. Right there, and if you go in already, you know, preconceived notion, you got white America, black America. You know, what about red America? Or, you know, what about yellow America? You know, we start putting these divisions up before we go in. You know, that's half our battle that we've already lost.
We defeated our purpose like this.
Exactly.
Isn't there a lot of prejudice against the information?
Is there
I
still
mean,
there?
I don't think of it that way because I don't.
There's already a preconceived, well, I'll speak for you. There's already this preconceived thought that all Native Americans are alcoholics.
Well, I know you got vodka in there or something in that. Right?
Yeah. But, you know, they could say that about the Finnish people too.
See,
You know what I'm saying?
but this though, like I said, the Jim Crow laws, those were established and broken. There's actually a law in the book in the Michigan laws that says me as a Native American still cannot legally own a bar in the state of Michigan.
Wow.
It's not enacted, it's not enforced, but it's still on the books because of.
Because you're gonna be an alcoholic.
Yeah, not only that, it would cost too much money to repeal it. Because, people don't want to admit that these prejudices still exist, and so, yeah, and that's a hard fact. It's like, okay, you can't just focus on one, I'm just saying, if we really start looking at our, I'm just, but it's sad because until we truly want to get to where we need to be and want to be, those are the things we need to take care of.
So why doesn't Black Lives Matter focus on the problem with Native Americans?
Because it's not relevant to them,
Because in our hearts, what is our concern?
ourselves.
Me. Yep, you're right. Exactly. And all the problems with their judgment on white people is part of that. Not, maybe Ron was mistreated, but I'm not concerned about Ron. I'm concerned about my mistreatment. No matter what happened to Ron, mine's worse because it's mine.
Well, that's like the Supreme Court this past week. They came out and said that 3/4 of the state of Oklahoma is technically tribal land. So now you have, you got almost 18 million square acres of land that now goes back to the nations of Oklahoma. Now people are scrambling because
We can't have that, can we?
Well, yeah, we were talking because it's related to a criminal case, but think of that happened here in Michigan. It's everything south and east and west of Mount Pleasant. But we don't want to think of those things. Like I said, it only, we only concern about what affects us or affects my family or.
You better grab your relatives and other people in your Native American tribe and start marching, and maybe break some buildings and set up
Knock down Christopher Columbus.
Yeah.
But you're right, Faith, about problems within their own culture. Because even in the Native American tribe that Jimmy belongs to, he is looked down upon, even within his own tribe, because he doesn't live up on the reservation in Isabella County.
And
What is your category? Oh, at large?
Yeah, I'm part of the at-large group. We're
At large.
James and I are considered what they call what all the tribal members would call we're apples.
What is that again?
We're apples.
It's hard to understand, Pastor.
It's that's what the tribal members who live on the reservation of Mount Pleasant, they refer to the members who don't live on the reservation. We are called apples. We're red on the outside, white on the inside.
Okay.
And so it's like I said, yeah, it's like that all over.
Yeah. Basically.
One of Rob's best friends he's from Oklahoma. Well, his family is. His tribe's in Oklahoma.
There you go.
So when they graduated, they went down there and they did that tribal, I don't know, dance, their dance.
So
But maybe he should get back to Oklahoma and might have
There you
some
go.
money. But he
Black-
doesn't have any casino money.
black people feel that a majority or pretty much any white person I encountered is prejudiced against me in some way, shape, or form. Can they find enough evidence in our society, even locally or nationally, to support that?
Yes.
And that angers me. Every time I see somebody on TV talking out of their rear end, because I know it's going to reflect on me. And in that part, I can understand why they would feel that way. But then once again, as you said, Faith, I think it was you, it angers us. It angers us to be lumped all together. But how often have black people been lumped all together? As a number of us said, I encountered that growing up. My parents, and especially my grandparents, lumped all black people together. And it does, it makes it hard to heal the divide, as you said, Chrissy, when both sides have to work on it. Yeah. Let's move on to question 2. Go back to the. Describe an experience you had with this kind of distrust when you were trying to interact with a person on the other side of racial division.
Today, or,
Pick a day.
I mean, it's just, this is something that, it's, some people in, like I said, Chrissy's field, my field, that we experience this on a daily basis. Not only against toward whites, non-whites, but toward each other. And you're always gonna have that distrust because, we were talking about it when we were at dinner. It's just that it's hard to truly know what's in someone's heart. And because, you don't let yourself allow yourself to know them. And these kinds of experiences, someone of, like I said, a black person, you could go out of your way, give them a cup of coffee, blanket, a hot meal, and they would still say, what's your angle? What are you trying to get me to get? What do you want? And trying to help you out. You
want to feel better? You feel guilty? You just want to make yourself feel better.
Yeah, and it's like that all over.
The thing that bothered me in the school system is, as a white person, many times when you deal with a black child, they'll come back at you and they'll say, you're just saying it because I'm black.
They've heard that.
Well, it's a go-to excuse, or something doesn't go their way, or they are put into a position that they may not want to be in. It's been ingrained in them because it's like, okay, well, you're not going to succeed because you're black. Not really. It's you make your bed, you lie. I mean, how many African American doctors do we know that are, very successful? I mean, Chrissy had a neurosurgeon that was at Genesis, the black guy, but he's probably one of the best around. So it's what you make yourself. But when that's ingrained in you and you're allowed to use that as my go-to excuse or whatever the case would be, how we're going to term it, yeah, then it manifests itself.
And on top of that, in America, we're told you can be anything you want, right? You try hard enough. That's a lie. You can't be anything you want.
Did you get that little clip on?
I didn't watch it. Is that part of it, though?
Oh, I wish you would have watched it. It's
Oh,
about,
I'm sorry. I saw it. It's on my list of things to do, but I haven't gotten.
what was it called? White,
I can't hear her, Pastor.
I'm sorry. Anyway, I sent a little clip to Pastor after our last Wednesday Bible class, and it was about white privilege. And it was a really cool little video. I'll have to send it out to you guys, and it makes you stop and think. And the gist of it was all these teenager, young adults, black, all mixed, black, white, whatever, were in it looked like a youth group. And they were doing a project or a game. It was a game. And the leader stood up and said, if you came from a family with two parents, take 2 steps forward. Have any of you guys seen this on YouTube?
No.
No.
People that have 2 parents in the home made 2 steps.
I mean, both their parents,
Yeah.
not a mom and a stepdad.
No, 2 parents,
2 parents.
still married. Take a step. Then it said, if you didn't have to worry about your next meal, take 2 steps. So by the end of this task, in about a half a dozen questions, who was at the front of the pack was about a half a dozen white kids. All the way in the back, who still had to run the race, was all the darker skinned children. So that's when they said, everything you have is not based on anything you did. And anybody in the back of the row, you have to do the same race, but you have a longer way to go, and it's nothing that you've done. So it was, that's why I sent that to you, and it's called white privilege.
I can maybe try to download and show it next.
I thought, I sat and watched that, and I'm like, that's so real.
I remember when she showed it to me, it's like, you could visibly see the anger on the black kids' faces. And
Well, it was more confusion, like,
yeah, but the white kids up at the front, they're just like, oh, hey, we're getting closer. Yeah, it was
interesting.
it was a good
Now,
video.
how did they feel when
Very
the
somber.
white kids,
They
when they
could-
realized what was going on? Back when my kids were in 5th grade, one of the teachers did a thing on slavery. And it was like the luck of the draw if you were a slave owner or a slave in the classroom. And I'll tell you what, those kids who went, but at that point, I mean, there were no black kids in Davidson when my kids were there. There was one that graduated with JD. But they did not like being a slave. I can tell you that. Because those, and of course the white kids, or the kids that were the slave owners, they took advantage of it. They were having them doing all kinds of stuff just as slave owners did. Yep.
And on the other side of that, I remember in regards to colleges and colleges cutting breaks financially, and also grade point average for disenfranchised minorities, and white kids that had good scholarships, good grades, that should have got good scholarships, couldn't, because they were giving those spots to others. And so you heard that on the other side. Here's the other side of it.
That's what happened to my son.
Affirmative action, that was.
That's what I want.
It
Yep.
was-
Affirmative action.
It was a law for a while, and then there were so many people that became more and more aggressive to repeal it. It went off the books real quick.
This is reverse discrimination.
It was. And when Jamie was at school, they had one dorm that was basically white, and across the courtyard was basically black. They called that the ghetto, and most of those kids only made it one semester. They partied all the time, and they didn't make it because they did not have the knowledge to really be there.
It's the knowledge, but also it's different when you're given it as opposed to when you work for it. And you see this when young kids inherit daddy's empire, right? His money and his empire. They tend to take the business and run it into the ground. Where dad had to work from the bottom up, and he tends to value things more.
That's what was the case. The company I worked with, the dad and mother worked real hard, and then when they had kids, they went down the hill in probably about 3 years.
I had, and I told you the story once before, I think I did, so I'm not going to go into detail, but there was a young autistic kid that was hanging out playing on the playground here. He was black, and I ended up taking him home. And he had a sponsor or a caregiver that I met. That gentleman was black. And right away, he was, who the heck are you? And were you out giving him drugs? Were you prostituting him? Just assumed that I was up to no good. And it took a little bit of time for me to bring his suspicions down where we could actually talk. And a lot of it wasn't what he said, it was just his look and how he just pretty much ignored me as I was standing there. And when he did look at me, it was not very friendly. And so there it is. I'm a white guy. I'm probably up to no good bringing his black caregivers and knowing the kid's autistic, and he's not, he's trusting. But the other thing I wanted to bring up as I was going through this study, I Googled some things about the what was happening in Seattle, the Chaz and Chop. As Mike Berger said, they originally called it Chaz. I think that was the what did that stand for? What one was an autonomous zone. And then they found out, according to Mike Berger, this makes sense though, that if it's autonomous, that means you're no longer part of the United States. So you aren't getting your Social Security money, or you're not getting any help, any kind of funding. So they changed it right away to CHOP. So it's still part of the United States. Anyway, I was reading a little bit about this because I know they tore it down. And I was wondering, did they ever, when people got out, what stories, what was the actual story of what went on there? You heard all kinds of things. Have you guys ever heard what went on there? Have you heard any news reports? Amazing, isn't it? So I looked this up. This was somebody in Seattle, and he was writing for one of the local papers. So when the people that organized it, the reason was to promote reverse hierarchy of oppression. They were looking to reverse the hierarchy of oppression. Native American, Black, and trans women are the highest authority in this area. So you would have been okay, Jim. Especially if you could be a Native American trans, then you would be good. So Native American, Black, and trans women are the highest authority. Whites are called upon to perform ritual acts of atonement.
What was that?
What?
You have to do things to make up for the oppression that your
Give
ancestors.
them all my money?
Yeah, they didn't say what it was. Although there was one area where it was a garden and you could come in there if you apologized. You had to make some form of formal apology for the effects of your ancestors. One of the Black Lives Matter activists, Nikita Oliver, this is what she said. They're working at decolonization, which means overthrowing capitalism, eliminating structures of patriarchy, white supremacy, and classism.
Socialist.
But there's always going to be at least two classes. There's always going to be those that have and those that do not have.
So what we heard was that some of it was they were somewhat successful as kind of like the peace, love utopia, where everybody's equal and everybody's happy. Does that sound like everybody's equal and everybody's happy?
No. Somebody
No.
died, they wouldn't let the paramedics in.
Why didn't you hear about this? Have you ever heard about the cancel culture?
No?
It's a term that's being batted about. We live in the cancel culture, and it's been going on for a while, and you especially see it in regards to people that are in the news, like celebrities, sports stars, and stuff. You say something wrong, and the media and the culture descends and disowns you, knocks you down in the media, vilifies you, and no longer will let you be part of society. You can apologize up and down and try to clarify yourself, but you're done. And in some cases, it's what people said years ago. You made this comment, now Faith, you're bad. And we don't want anything to do with you. I don't want to hear you apologizing. You just go away. This goes on. It is going on.
It's gone on for a long time. Because they would say that you did something, and you find out that that was a lie and you hadn't done it, but then the retraction is on the back page of a newspaper about 3 lines.
So why aren't you hearing anything? Why aren't you hearing any writings on the news about what really went on?
Because in their opinion, it doesn't sell news.
And if you write that story, guess what's going to happen to you personally as the writer of the newspaper?
You're gonna be.
Goodbye.
Yes. And so I heard this too. There is a silent majority out there that doesn't go along with getting rid of the police force, doesn't think that Chaz or Chop or whatever you want to call it is right, but afraid to speak out because what probably is a strong minority, but as a minority will descend on you and vilify you. Black Lives Matter is big. And I mean, some of their stuff is good. I understand it. And we'll talk a little bit about where their slogan, Black Lives Matter, comes from as opposed to All Lives Matter. But when I read these kind of things, that makes me distrust that movement. I can't get behind it, and also for other reasons. I mean, you can say one thing, but when you have somebody that represents that and wants to create an area where it's good for everybody except for one race of people, okay, what did you learn from Black people being oppressed? You didn't learn anything except that, well, let's oppress the white people.
But that wasn't just white people per se, because when they were rioting, you might have been a Black-owned business and they still went in and looted it.
Let's move on to question 3. Unless anybody there in Zoom land at home there, you guys pop in with comments if you have some. Question 3, discuss how Black America's one-sided view of prejudice makes it impossible for white Americans to heal the racial divide by themselves.
because they don't want to hear that we may not feel the way they feel. We're turning a deaf ear.
Plus, if they believe that they don't have prejudice, that they are right in saying that all white people are prejudiced against blacks and hate blacks, or somewhere in their mind want to keep things status quo, don't want to allow them any kind of equality, then how can you? It's like Chrissy said, you got to have both sides have to come together. And if one side refuses to come to the table or even talk. And again, Black Americans have no problem finding example of prejudiced white people. The KKK is still out there. White supremacy is still going strong. And on the other hand, as far as Black Lives Matter and their protests, you've got this Antifa groups and other groups that are all about anarchy that are willing to swing in and kind of co-opt or even take over what they're doing. And what does that make us as white people think?
There's a lot of crazy people out there.
All Black Lives Matter wants to do is destroy, right? Which may really not be the case. But once again, I've quoted this lady who's in Black Lives Matter, and you know, it's the other way. Both sides, we both struggle with things. We struggle to trust what the other person says, and anytime you group people in a stereotype, whether you're doing it in a positive sense or a negative sense, it affects our ability to deal with things, doesn't it?
Also that white Americans are afraid that the black people might be right.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean,
I don't want.
You know, no one wants to come to face to face with their own discrimination, but you know what? I mean, it would be so traumatic if white America realized, hey, we are prejudiced against the black people. I mean, it's oh yeah, those are things that we just wanted to be able to get over.
Yep, we're all sinful human beings, and it's not in our nature to recognize our sin and confess it. The only reason we do is we have the Holy Spirit prompting us. But nobody in culture. I mean, politicians have people they pay to spin. Instead of having to confess, you spin and make it sound good, right? I really didn't mean that. The press is blowing it over.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Let's face it, if I was on an elevator and I was the only one on there and 3 or 4 black guys get in, I'd be scared to death. Being alone in an elevator with all these black guys, but I wouldn't be as nervous if it was all white guys, but I'd probably still be.
Problem is they don't know you, or they'd be scared.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, the fake, I want to make a comment on the fake news though. Yes, and there is a politician that cries fake news all the time. On the other hand, once again, because of the cancel culture, there's a point to be made. Where were these reports on Chaz and Chop that I just read you? Why didn't we hear about that on the news?
Wasn't important enough.
Or it doesn't fit who they want to tailor to. If we have the story, people that are that watch our news station that are proactive, Black Lives Matter, and all these movements are going to be mad, and they're not going to watch our news, and we're not going to be able to sell as much commercial airtime.
Then our ratings go down.
There is, I think, did I mention this at the 10 a.m. study? Part of what Revelation talks about is you remember in Revelation, there's the beasts. There's 3 beasts, right? One of the beasts that comes up, I believe, out of the water represents Satan's control over all human institutions. News outlets are human institutions. And
right.
according to Dr. Brighton, who wrote the commentary on Revelation, we get close to the end time, all human institutions will turn against the church. They'll all become corrupt.
Well, they're half corrupt now.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
They're not, the days of Walter Cronkite and guys like that are long gone.
Was Walter Cronkite, was he an Italian? I just want to see if there's any reason why you mentioned him and love him so much.
But I don't think
I think
he
he
was.
was. Love you, Gary.
Might have some Polish in him. you know, and some Jewish in him.
Don't send your friends after me, Gary.
That's okay. It's a good thing I like you.
I do pay him protection money, so.
It's sad though that,
Well, I'll pick up my check on Saturday.
What's that?
it's sad that only certain stories are picked out.
Yeah.
I mean, I recall reading this earlier today where these two 20-year-old black guys, they were heading home and they saved a white family from a burning house in Indiana. Why aren't those being,
Where did you hear about that?
well, it's right here. It's on CBS News, but it's something that, the national media won't.
Yeah.
won't pick
So it's on your phone, but is it on CBS News on TV, in other words?
Right.
No.
How much has been broadcast? So it's sad that instead of looking for the bad,
We're balancing.
yeah,
Balancing.
Like if you watch Fox News, it's all one way, and if you watch CNN, it's all the other.
Yep.
There's no true,
There's no true, yeah, no true reporting of news and facts. It's all colored with opinion from where you stand.
Yeah, it's all opinion, it's all colored with opinion, where it used to be. They just.
But-
Like
But-
Gary said, Walter Cronkite reported the news. Here's what happened. You're adults.
You figure it out.
Yeah.
But, sometimes I think some of the things that we not mentioning is that we say it's their opinion, and I agree with that, but these stations are owned by big corporations and big people that we don't even know who they are. And so if somebody's on there running their mouth and have an opinion contrary to what the owners of the station are, they're not going to last very long. So I don't think it's just the individual newscaster. I think it's the marching orders that a lot of these individual newscasters have to stay within too, the boundaries. So I don't know, maybe I'm just jaded, but I just,
What
You just-
corporation or company is buying most of the airtime for that station and especially for that news program? And
Yeah.
are you going to have a negative news story in regards to them? Are you going to make a
I don't
big
think
deal
so.
out of it?
I don't think so.
Let's
No.
move on. And I'm sorry. Somebody else want to say something?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Gary.
the last 5 or 10 years, it's the news stations that have either taken a full right turn or a full left turn. And then at that point in time, you kind of got to follow the money. They're very, very jaded, either to the right or to the left. And, news that's being projected and stuffed down everybody's pipe is not the news of when I was growing up as a child. This is one-sided opinions, heavily one way or the other. And even Wolf Blitzer, who I used to love to listen to 15, 20 years ago, he's so far stuffed up somebody's boxer shorts that, unless you're a full believer of what he says, I can't stand to listen to the guy anymore. It's just because it's just all like lopsided stories. So it's that you combined all that stuff that you get on CNN or Fox or Channel 12 or, some of the big news stations, ABC, NBC. And it's no wonder that things are a little bit lopsided, screwed up, because they're not reporting, in my opinion, stuff that is actual, factual,
Yep.
and totally real. They're always slighted.
Yep.
And
that only adds to our prejudice.
and then it's going to be one way or the other. They're festering a wound that might have been a scrape, and now they make it look like you've got bed sores all over your body.
Yep.
Blown out of proportion because if it sells news, you blow it out of proportion to focus on it. You want more people to
Well,
watch.
it sells. You know, gossip is always more interesting to look at or listen to for some people than, you know, oh, Sally kissed a guy. They want to hear who Sally got laid by last night and how many Sally got laid by. That's the gossip news. It's all one-sided, even though maybe none of it's true. You know, think about in high school, you know, people used to talk about, you know, certain guys or girls. And half the time it was all junk.
Yep. Let's carry on with our study. A cultural perspective, I don't see color. Somebody want to read that paragraph underneath that heading on the bottom of, or in the middle of page 80?
Imagine you are a white person talking with a black neighbor, co-worker or fellow student, who is telling you about racial discrimination he or she has encountered from whites in the past. And you say, when I look at other people, I don't see color. But the person responds with skepticism, distrust, or a harsh reply. What is going on?
So question number 1, why do you think a black person might object to the statement, I don't see color?
Because I don't believe it.
They don't trust
Well, you know what?
Because they know
Everybody
they
sees
can.
color. But you do.
They typically, you know, and I have a lot of black friends, so see, I can relate to that statement. A black person oftentimes will see anybody that's not black as a problem, as a potential problem or a serious problem, whether it be true or not. And, you know, if you're not of their color, and I'm dating myself back into the 70s, then, you know, you're not on their side of the fence. You're not on their team. So, you know, I can see how they can think that, because, and I'll tell you a short story. In high school, when we had the minor riots, it was the blacks against whatever, okay? And they were feeling repressed and they were feeling, you know, threatened, and they wanted to overthrow the entire school. And I had a problem with all of that stuff. And the guy's telling me that there was only 350 black guys in the school against all these white guys. And I said, well, you know, I'm Sicilian. So there's 2 Italians in this school, Steve Mariotti and myself. He's just a regular white Italian guy, and I'm a Sicilian guy. I says, I got more black in me than half the people in this entire school does. So why do you want to pick on me as a person? Well, you're a white guy. I says, no, I'm not. I says, I'm really a Sicilian Italian. So at that point in time, he had to really think about it and talk to his friends. But from that point in that argument in high school, they kind of like left me alone from that point forward, because I wasn't truly the white Anglo-Saxon dude, you know, that they thought I was. So there's a lot of distrust from the black people to the white people. And in Genesee County, you know, we have a lot of people, we have a mixture of people here, not quite as big as New York City, but we have quite a mixture. And you've got a lot of Southern people here from the deep South that, you know, I don't think I have to tell anybody how their general purpose feeling was about the people of color, the people of the black color. You know, I never heard the N-word so many times growing up as I did in some of the events that I was at. And I just really despise it, because I don't like to use those terminologies. Okay? So I could say to somebody that I don't see color in how I treat people, And in my business dealings all these years, 40, 50% of my clientele are not white. They're of all different persuasions. And I have a lot of black friends that I like a lot that could sit down at my dinner table at any point in time. But then there's some that are just so far off the beaten path, and I don't care what their color is. And I wouldn't want to break bread with them in the IMA auditorium. So that's my take.
Let's look at it this way. When you say I don't see color, fill in what that means from your heart. What are you saying?
To me, it means I don't see you as a person of a race that is important to you. I'm saying that your race doesn't mean as much to me. And I think that would be offensive that way.
Yeah. If I'm a black person who's been the history of my race, we've been put down and ignored, and my parents, to counter that, have brought me up to be proud of who I am. That I need to not be embarrassed about being a black person, but I'm proud. And so if that's where I come from, if that's where I come from, and you're saying that you don't see color, I want you to see color. I want you to see I'm black. I'm not embarrassed with it. I'm proud. Recognize me for who I am.
I take people for what they are.
Now that's not what you're saying, but that's what I'm filling in with what you say. That's the way communication works. I hear you in regards to my relationship with you. If I'm friends with you, I won't be so quick to jump on what you say. But if I'm distrustful and you say something and it's the least bit ambiguous, and you may not be ambiguous as far as you're concerned, but in my mind, if it is, I'm going to jump all over it. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by I'm just a pastor at a small church? It's that hyper offensiveness that jumps in. And I think that has something to do here when you say I don't see color. If I'm proud of who I am as a black person, you say you don't see color, well, you don't really see me then, do you?
I know working in the Flint schools and the young people that I worked with, if I were to say to a black family, I don't see color, I would have lost any credibility that I was trying to establish. I would have lost any kind of genuineness between myself and the people that I was trying to work with. They'd have seen me as phony, and it wouldn't have been true. How can I say I don't see color when I can see color? I don't necessarily have to be prejudiced because of it, but I know I wouldn't have, it wouldn't have been it wouldn't have been beneficial for myself or any of the people that I tried to work with.
You know what else I don't see besides color? I don't see missionaries that work in South Korea, teacher dudes. That's what I don't see. Hi, James. I love the target, buddy. Throwing it right at you. Just to fill you in, we're on page 80.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi,
We're on
James.
page 80 of the study guide, and under reflection questions on page 80. And one
thank
we
you.
were discussing was, why do you think a black person might object to the statement, I don't see color?
Okay.
If I just want to give you a chance to say, if you want to say something, and then we'll go on to question
Yeah.
two.
I come out of tutelage of Connie's, and there's, I think, at going all the way back to the first session that we had about identity, when I was in my prime of middle school, high school, and really being in the thick of things, where I didn't necessarily have to think about color because it was all around me. The big debate kind of started to be whether or not you would call somebody black or African American, and then on the negative side, whether or not they could use the N-word. And so those three words were going around. And then when I went into university, I had a professor who was African American, capital B, black, because you could definitely have African Americans who were white. People like kind of shook some people's like, oh really? yeah, there's lots of, especially South Africa. That's what apartheid was all about, remember? That whole discussion kind of took place during that time. But and now to see it come full circle about this, but I would say now I would go on and repeat everything that Connie just said. So I'll leave it there.
Let's move
Let
on
me
to,
give an
go ahead.
example, Pastor, about it being two-sided. And I think Chrissy kind of alluded to that earlier. I went on a conference in Ohio when I was still working with a wonderful Black lady, and she said, we can save some money and we'll stay at my cousin's house instead of paying the big bucks for the hotel, because she was right in the same city. I said, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think I've ever slept at a Black person's house before. So we get there and, I slept with Edna and, in the same bed kind of thing. And, the cousin said, Connie, you're the first white person that ever stayed overnight in my house. And I thought, and you know what? And I said this too, this is the first Black home I've ever stayed overnight in. And so that kind of broke the ice. We're able to laugh about it, but the similarities was there, because I'm sure she was as apprehensive about it as I was thinking, what am I getting into? So that was just really pretty cool example. And I think, James, when you were talking, that kind of brought back that memory. So anyway.
Good enough. Let's move on to question 2.
And the Green Perry.
Describe a time when you were once mistreated by one person and later found yourself having a hard time trusting anyone when you were in a similar situation. So this doesn't have to be racial. This can be anybody from your past. It can be a mistreatment by the opposite sex, by a friend, by a stranger, whatever.
Young love. First thing that comes to mind.
Anybody have something they want to share?
How about you, Pastor?
My first girlfriend in high school dumped me for one of my best friends. This is the first love, puppy love. And for a while I was, that hurt. And I didn't want anything to do with girls. I decided, I was not really a troublemaker at that time. I wasn't doing anything bad.
Were you 5'6" or 5'7" back then?
Yeah, I was. But I was a pretty good student, but I hung out with some guys that did some questionable things. We were friends in the same youth group at church. And at that point, I decided, well, she thinks that I'm a shady character. To hell with her. I'll just be what she thinks I am. And I took a dive down into that lifestyle. And there was a lot of things happening at the same time, problems at home and stuff. It all compounded, but that was one of the reasons why I kind of started doing things that I'd never done before.
You're a bad boy.
So I was not a real bad boy. But yeah, and so I didn't want anything to do with girls anymore because they hurt. But of course, you're a young teenager, you got hormones going, you can't ignore that for very long.
Well, your friend Rosie could help you.
But, and I see you guys all smiling, so I know you've had those experiences, and that kind of helps us understand why what he says about mistreatments by one person, we can say, well, anybody like this now. I had a teacher who I was in band, and I decided I didn't want to be in band anymore when I was in 10th grade. We had a radio station at the high school, and I wanted to do that. I love music. And he used to, every time I saw him in the hallway, he would say something that snagged him, And you could say a lot worse things than you can now. And teachers kind of were like at that level. You had a hard time accusing them of anything.
Oh, they get spots too.
I kind of lumped him in with what I called the establishment at that time. And didn't trust I stopped trusting adults, and all the teachers were, out to get you. They didn't want you to have fun. And so,
Huh.
Except for the teacher that was in charge of the radio station. I liked him.
Yeah.
Anywho, we'll move on to question 3. How might a Black person's former experiences with prejudice and discrimination contribute to his or her skepticism at remarks by well-meaning white people?
Well, it depends if he had bad former experiences.
Let's say he did, because we're talking about prejudice and discrimination. So how are they going to hear I don't see color, and I mean it as, you're just a dude, like I'm a dude. And how are they going to hear that?
Well, it depends. It depends on if you respect your fellow man or not.
Well, he's been mistreated, so he's.
Yes.
Well,
He's
you've
been-
been
He's been
mistreated.
the subject of prejudice and discrimination.
You've been in the past, former experiences. If you run across a person who is nice to you, who talks to you respectfully, who treats you differently, then that's what I call a horse of a different color. You know, you're going to meet good people and bad people of all races, creeds, and colors. But when you meet somebody like I met you, and I thought, you know what? He's a pastor, but he's still a pretty good dude. You know? And it's a whole different thing when you meet somebody, because I've met some priests and pastors that you talk to them for 30 seconds and the hair on the back of my neck stands up, because I don't get that warm and fuzzy feeling about it as I did like I do you.
Well, let's talk about the enigma of Catholic priests. There are pastors I know, and this isn't the reason I don't walk around wearing a collar, but there's pastors I know that don't like to wear a collar because they're associated with being in the Catholic Church. And, oh, you must be one of those guys that abused kids. You must be one of those perverts.
Well,
Because
that's
all
a
Catholic priests abuse kids. And so I'm guilty until proven innocent, really. That's a good way to put it. Guilty until proven innocent. And here's okay with men. I was told at Hiller's when we went through some of our training, you had to be doubly sure that you were never in a room alone with a woman subordinate or even a woman co-equal, especially if you were going to do any kind of disciplinary action, because if she accused you of something, you are guilty until proven innocent because you're a man.
That's a very true position that you do not want to put yourself into.
And is there reason for that?
Oh, hell
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
There are plenty of men that would feed into that stereotype. Does that mean that all men are like that?
No,
No.
or all women. But you get the select few that if you put yourself in a one-on-one situation and you don't have a third person in the room, that's your witness, so to speak, you're just asking for trouble today because we're in a litigious society. And being in a litigious society, they can say he said, she said, and the accuser oftentimes is going to win on a situation like that because you got no witnesses to say that you did not. And that can work both ways, male or female.
Faith, you mentioned how in an elevator, 3 black guys walk in, you're going to be apprehensive. Can you control that at all? No. Why do you have that feeling of apprehensiveness? Has anything ever happened to you in the elevator?
No.
But you've seen news stories, right? And there's this kind of understanding and
Part of it
culture.
would be how they were acting when they got on too.
How do we understand black men treat white women?
Badly.
Sometimes very well.
But that's not what you see.
That's the natural prejudice in most people is black guys, all they want to do is abuse a white woman.
I never heard that.
we get that from TV,
Yeah, we get the
movies,
TV, movies of the past,
magazines, right?
maybe even news stories of the past.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's not truth. It's not truth. Not every black person is like that. And I love the story about one of you guys about the black people that went and ran in the house and saved the white people from burning.
Yeah.
Good people.
That's what people are. There's people all across the spectrum, but we have a hard time believing that, don't we? That's not our first reaction. And so you can see how a black person's former experiences with prejudice is going to color them. If over and over again they've been told this by their parents and their grandparents, and they've seen it in action. And just in Flint, how many cops are not don't treat people with respect because of color? I don't know. I imagine there might be some. And
Gotta go outside of Flint to find that kind of crap.
if there's one, that one gets built up exponentially because that's how we work. That's how our stereotype works, right? If there's one, there must be more. In fact, they're probably all like that. And you can change that color from white or black. It doesn't matter. Black cop's going to pull me over because I'm white because he's got to make up for how he was treated growing up.
I'm not saying necessarily with the police, but sometimes a person might not say anything, but sometimes it's the way that they look at you,
Yep.
that like I'm looking down my nose at you because of the color of your skin. It's what's not said just as much as what is said. And people have unfortunately experienced that.
Yeah.
Both ways.
And
Both ways.
I used Flint police officers and police officers in general, not to make any point or say anything. Just an example. My personal opinion is most Flint police officers are good.
I agree.
As with police force in Genesee County, the Metro Police, the sheriffs.
I agree.
Let's move on now to page 81. Somebody want to read that paragraph starting at the top and going all the way down to reflection questions?
Deep down,
Okay.
go ahead. Deep down under everything else is the black presumption that they cannot be prejudiced. Remembering this can help white America know how to move forward. The movie Remember the Titans was set in 1971. It's about two football coaches, Bill Yost and Herman Boone. White football coach Bill Yost is demoted after leading his team to 15 winning seasons. He is replaced by Herman Boone. Yost is loved and respected in his hometown. Boone is very different. He is black, tough, and opinionated. How these two men overcome their differences and turn a group of racially diverse and hostile young men into state champion plays out before your eyes in this movie. In this scene, the Titans have been starting to experience success. They are racking up wins, and the town is starting to rally around this team. It looks like sports is accomplishing the type no longer matter.
Type of unity that only sports can seem to do. You skipped a line there.
Skin color, I'm sorry. Maybe they have moved beyond seeing color.
It has drawn the city together and skin color appears to no longer matter. Maybe they have moved beyond seeing color. So I actually have spared no expense, and I have this clip. I have the movie, and it's queued up, hopefully, if all things work. Problem is, you guys in Zoom land, I'm not sure you'll see it. I think you'll hear it, but you may not see it. So you'll have to watch the movie yourself and watch it.
Gotta get a hold of your IT guy.
What's that?
Gotta get a hold of your IT guy.
All right, let's see if I can get this up here.
Oh, yeah, we can see.
Can you see it? Let's see if you can see it when it starts going. And
I can't.
Why did I? Yeah, I know you can't because I minimized it. I did the opposite thing that I wanted to do. Theater mode. Let's move this.
I got faith in you, Pastor.
That faith may be misplaced. There goes nothing.
Side.
On your feet, let's go. I'm gonna talk to you tonight about
Nope.
winning. You're already winners because you didn't kill each other up at camp. Tonight, we got Hayfield. Like all the other schools in this conference, they're all white. They don't have to worry about race. We do. But we're better for it, man. Let me tell you something, you don't let anything, nothing come between us. Nothing tears us apart.
Greek mythology, the Titans were greater even than the gods. They ruled their universe with absolute power. Well, that football field out there tonight, that's our universe. Let's rule it like Titans.
Defense takes the field for the first time against the Haney Hawks, led by quarterback Haney on the Hawks 32-yard line.
Mama, are all white girls that crazy? You guys can do really.
Allen, gotta stick your man. They're gonna score us all night. Too fast, Gary. I can't stick with him. Let's go.
Shake up that defense, yo. You just rolled out your offense. Hey, they score again, I'm taking over. Son, you missed the block by a mile. You didn't even have the football fumble this time. There's no excuse. No excuse. You want to play football or not? Do you want to play football? Boy, get over there on the bench.
Earth, take over for me. You got it?
Hey.
You all right? That was a 2-year start at GW. All this yelling he's doing, it don't do nothing but make me play worse. I can't play for this. You come play linebacker for me. 23 is killing us. I want you to get out there. I want you to cover him for me. You want me to go now? Yeah, I can't. I haven't practiced with the defense. I can't. That doesn't matter. I just want you to get out there. I want you to cover 23. That's all you have to do. We'll talk about the rest. I'm going to put this one away.
I think Yost is trying to let them score on purpose.
What? Do you? Okay, let's go. What's Petey doing in there? Looks like Yost is trying him out on defense. He's taking Allen out. Yo! Come on, let's see what happens. It might be all right. It's okay. You're okay. You're okay.
Don't you take out my son!
He doesn't beat like he stole something, Mr. Bosley.
Just stay out of it, girl.
He just getting beat, that's all.
Go!
Time to hear y'all. We ain't going nowhere. We gotta be loud all the time. And Virginia can hear you, baby. Tell her you fumble, man. I want to hear you. Second of all, who won the game?
Don't worry about it. It's not your fault. They like to show off, and that's what they do.
Wait. They. I heard you say they.
Yeah, them over there.
But what you mean by that? You talking about Pete? You're you and they.
Gary.
Hey, Gary. I've been, buddy.
Heading over to the hill, Gary. Everyone's gonna be there.
Why don't you hang out down here with us?
What are you trying to do, Gary?
Listen, when something unexpected comes, you just gotta pick it up and run with it.
I'm not running in the same direction as you are, Gary. Come with us. Look, standing up for what you believe in, it's all well and good, but you got your priorities real mixed up this time.
Are you coming or not, man?
He goes. Come on, man. No. What, man? It's on me, man. We party on. Let's go. Look here, man. All right, this here Virginia. All right, they got problems with, you know.
They don't want to sing this.
No, man, that's history, bro. It's on me. Come on.
We're full tonight, boys.
What? There's tables all over the place, man. What are you talking about?
Well, this is my establishment. I reserve the right to refuse service to anybody. Yeah, that means you too, hippie boy. Now, y'all want something to eat, you can take these boys out back and pick it up from the kitchen.
I tell you, man.
Come on, Petey, man.
No, man.
I told you. What you mean you didn't know? You think I was playing with you?
He ain't know, Petey.
Lou, he don't want to know. When you pull some crap like that, you better be able to back it up.
Man, let's go, man. Go out. Go out.
Let's go, Rev.
Man, let's go, man. Man, let's go. What happened? This man acting a fool tonight, man. Petey. Man, don't even talk to that man, man. He got all crazy and stuff. Man, don't even make no sense. Petey, you know, man, it's not time.
Okay. Very relevant to our conversation, isn't it? Really. I showed you a little bit more than I had to because you kind of got to get the feeling, if you haven't seen the movie before, that this team, I mean, they're working as a team. They've overcome the racial thing. Both coaches ran a really hard camp, and now they see each other not by color, but just as they're on the same team. Yet, how does the town look at things?
They're still separate.
Very much so. And one of the best lines, along with why we're supposed to watch this, was what they encountered when they went in the eating establishment. But that when it begins, they like to show off. When the one white kid, head of the defense, says that, and the other one goes, "What do you mean by they?"
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're talking about, is it not?
Yep.
What did he mean? They as in those guys that are walking ahead of us. Or maybe even the one guy, because he did a great job on defense. They moved him to defense and he get a great job. Could be they as the defense, but how does the other one automatically say? They as in those black people. This is how they do things.
Except there was a white guy up there with them.
Didn't matter.
I know.
He too was an outsider.
That's true. He
That
was
was
from
Virginia.
He was from California and he was a hippie.
We fill things, what people say, with our relationship and also the prejudices and the experiences we have in our heart. When I was early on in my preaching career, before I went to seminary, I don't even remember what the sermon was about, but a real good friend of mine, in fact, one of the reasons why I came back to church the second time, got very offended. He thought I was disparaging GM automotive engineers, and particularly him. And that was the furthest thing from my mind. I do know whatever I was preaching, it had nothing to do with the automotive companies. But this is at a time when they were struggling. This was the beginning of the recession. And he took great offense to it. And he didn't want anything to do with me for quite a while. I couldn't talk to him. He didn't even want to listen to what I said. And I really made me sit down and go, whoa. So they like to show off. And then the question one, what happened in this scene with the new quarterback, Sunshine? Sunshine's the hippie dude.
He had an awakening because he didn't, in California was probably a little more advanced and didn't have the prejudice. I mean, it was still there, but they probably didn't have for whites only as much there. And he didn't believe that they couldn't get served. He didn't understand it.
Did he have any bad intentions by encouraging them to go into the restaurant?
No, he genuinely thought that he'd buy and everybody'd be happy.
He was innocent in that.
How did his black players, co-black players see it though? Did they see his innocence at all?
No,
Were they interested in his innocence at all?
no.
No.
They just thought.
Why? Why did
Because
they?
were so hurt.
It was hurtful, wasn't it? It was terrible.
And I think they thought he brought him into that restaurant to humiliate him.
Yeah. You would naturally assume that because maybe that's happened to them in the past. Or they've heard that's what white people like to do. Have you ever been denied service anyplace?
Yeah.
As a young man with long hair that went up in the Upper Peninsula one time, I mean, you have a lot of those guys up there now. We walked in a place, me and my friends, and we probably smelled like some herbal stuff. They just looked at us. We sat down and they just looked at us and it got real quiet and we walked out. It is very embarrassing. In fact, it's kind of scared because, well, our perception of them up there is they all got guns. And maybe they
They
did.
probably do.
Yeah, it's very embarrassing to be snubbed, is it not? If you've ever had that happen.
In there.
And so and what did Sunshine try to do to make up for this? Did you guys get to see the whole clip at home? Could you watch it on your computers? Did it come through?
No.
No? Okay.
But if you had turned your screen up, we could have watched it on the TV behind you.
Oh, yeah, I should have tried that.
Yeah, Potts, you could have tried that.
I didn't know.
Yeah. You sound like my brother now.
We were muted, so we
I
just
didn't
listened.
know. I didn't do it.
Yeah, I muted you for the movie. You're all unmuted now. But you were able to hear it, right? You heard it?
Yes.
Some of it.
Sometimes the hearing wasn't really good.
The
It
best
was
I can-
jumpy, kind of jumpy.
You can go to YouTube and rent it. I would suggest you do or buy it. It really is a good movie. And especially now that we've had this study, it'll be as I was watching it, I picked up on a lot of what we've been studying. Like that, they like to show off thing just really hit me hard.
I think at the end there, when they brought it up, was trying to show him that he was sorry.
Smarter than me.
Generally, and he was. His character really, but it didn't make any difference. No. Question 2, what impact do you think the event had on the unity of the team?
I think the white guys, after witnessing it, realized how bad it was for the black guys.
I think it might have made him stronger.
There was a realization, especially the one guy that was left there just with his mouth open looking. He was captain of the defense. Yeah, you kind of get the idea that he has an awakening.
And I think the other guy, when the carload of people come up, when he saw that they were kind of separating from them, that awakened his eyes.
Yeah, he got hit double whammy. He had that happen, and then he's watching all this unfold.
You know, in the beginning of an earlier part, Sunshine's dad was an Air Force officer.
Yeah.
And when he's dropping his son off at football camp, he tells Coach Boone, because we talk about the diversity and whatnot, and he flat out said, these boys can fight together, they can play football together.
Yeah.
So it's, it's like, you can go back to, how Sunshine might have been brought up. They truly didn't see color. They saw brothers. They saw fellow airmen, fellow soldiers.
Yeah, in the service, yeah, he had a different experience growing up.
But as I said, to parlay on that, I think that was kind of something else to bring up too, that, his dad thought it was okay, nothing wrong with it. Why can't he play?
The one guy that got up and said, why do you take my son out? He was very prejudiced.
Yes, yep. And that he was prejudiced in the way of money. He was an important businessman in the town.
Right.
You better not take my boy out.
Or you won't get any support for it.
Yeah. Kind of as I remember the movie, how it kind of works out is it does drive a wedge into the team briefly of disunity, but it actually makes them stronger. When they realize that the town's against them, they kind of do come together and say, we have to stick up for each other because the town's out to destroy us. And let's do that. And as they are successful and they keep winning football games, they change the heart of the town. Just to watch them work together, black and white. There's not too far after this movie, I really wanted to show it. There's a lot of things I'd like to show in this movie, but the one black guy that was standing there asking what happened on the way out, you see him come out of his house and he's standing there, and all of a sudden a police car rolls up and you see him get really nervous. And the guy rolls the window down, he's just looking at him and, hello, officer. And I think he even says it, you on the football team or something? But his comment is, that game you played last night, that's the best defense I've ever seen. Keep it up. And he's just standing there with his mouth open. That's not what he expected a police officer to say. Excellent scene.
Well, another part too is when the captain of defense, he asked his coach to kick his best friend off the team. They were, they're both white kids growing up, 18 years best friends or however long. And he thought of the team more than friendship with his best friend.
Because he wouldn't block for the black quarterback. He refused to block for the black quarterback. And then I think the black quarterback, he gets injured or something. So Sunshine becomes a quarterback. Sunshine's a really cool character in the whole thing. He is. Anyway, let's leave it there, and we'll come back next week and pick it up with more cultural perspectives. Is there anything you want to add that you didn't get to say, or any comments you want to make on the movie, or anything we've discussed up till this point?
I think that movie probably a great example of, the stigma and the conversation that divides us. That was back in the early 70s.
It was set when they were desegregating schools. They purposely bust these black kids into an all-white school. And that's why the problem with the football team, it was all white, and the white coach was the coach, and he had won a bunch of teams. And so now, since they're bringing the black kids over, they got to bring a black coach in too, which is Herman Boone, also known as Denzel Washington. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Denzel
Yeah.
Washington. There's a great scene where he's in football camp. He's struggling to deal with this divide. And so he does a number of things. The first thing he does is when they get on the bus to go, he makes everybody get off the bus because it's one white bus and one black bus. And now it's going to be all the defense and all the offense. One bus is for offense, one bus is for defense. Black and white got to sit together. Black and white got a room together. And there's a little bit of scuffles and there's some fighting. And then I think one of the best scenes is he gets, when he's struggling to get them together, so he gets them either early in the morning or late at night. I think it's early in the morning, has them run to one of the Civil War battlegrounds. They run through the mist and the fog, and Herman Boone has this great speech where he's talking about American lives were spilled here, fellow Americans, and it's a tragedy. And if we don't come together, that same tragedy is going to happen to us. We have to come together right here, right now. It's moving.
Another thing in that movie, the little black girl said that our old white girl.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other comments or questions you wanted to make but didn't have a chance to?
I can say that
I'll
movie,
save mine for Sunday.
Remembering the Titans is good, but another good movie that I enjoy, if you get a chance, if you haven't seen it, is The Help.
The Help.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
It's also a good movie to watch, and it makes you stop and think.
The Help is a good movie to watch.
Was that with Eddie Murphy? Was he in that?
No.
That's Dan.
Huh?
Eddie Murphy?
There was a serious movie that I watched. I didn't get all of it. I came in when Susan was watching it. He's like this cook, waiter, or just he helps out a family that I think it's just a mom and her kid, and he kind of helps out. He's like the tutor or whatever, all purpose.
I haven't seen it.
It's got Val Davis and Stone, and it's got a lot of stars. It's a good movie.
But it's another one that shows the divide and how the girl growing up that was raised by black families
that the one where she says, you is beautiful, you is special?
Yes,
She's
it's
teaching,
a good show.
she's teaching the white girl, because she's the maid growing up, this little white girl. The black maid is giving her a lot.
Talks about their fear, their distrust, and all that.
You can always ask.
Anything else?
I think this class has opened up a lot of eyes.
Good. Has this been good for you?
Yes.
It just helps us understand that, you know, it's, that there are, you know, leaps and bounds to be made. And, you know, I was gonna bring up earlier, the crimes in Atlanta, child killings, nobody thought in their wildest dreams it was gonna be a black guy doing it. And then when they found out, they're like, no way, this is wrong, this can't be, it's gotta be a white guy. It's our own perceptions, and, you know, if we can start facing those,
What
any
about
chance.
in that shooting in Chicago today? Was that at a black community?
It was south side of Chicago, which I think is, well, you mean the funeral home?
Yeah.
It's predominant.
It didn't say, you got the idea that it was gangs. I mean, they weren't really clear on it. But I did read that everybody that was in the funeral home, that they drew guns, or a lot of them drew guns, which tells me was one gang shooting at another gang.
It used to happen in Flint too.
I do know when I was in Chicago, I was told you stay away from the south side of Chicago. You drive through it on the expressway, but you don't make any stops.
You just kind of wave at them at the train. They're all standing.
Jim Croce said, south side of Chicago.
Yeah.
Remember the time we were walking, John?
The metro train, if I had taken it, it bypasses all those neighborhoods and just head right into downtown Chicago. And then there's those people in South Korea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't believe they keep letting us Americans in.
Okay, last chance to comment, and I'll close with prayer, and then you guys can.
If there's a number of movies that have been released that are free for watching, or others too that I'll try and share a list of, but and some book lists that have come out by a few people that I was either teachers with or otherwise. So
That'd be great.
I'll try and do that as a reply to the emails.
That's our own South Korean version of Roger Ebert.
What was the name of the movie?
Let's
With the lady who did all the calculations for Apollo 13.
let's pray, and then we'll talk about that. Okay.
Hidden Figures.
Thank you. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this study and how it's opening our eyes and helping us to understand. We pray that it not only will give us understanding, but as we keep going through this study, it'll give us a way to go forward, a way to be the church, a way to be patient and loving and forgiving, even when others have preconceived notions about us. Help us to understand we have those against black people, and black people have those against us. But overall, we know that Jesus died for all, and he loves all. And he truly doesn't see color. He sees each individual soul. And that's how we need to communicate it, not by maybe saying all souls matter, but just through our words and our actions, making sure others know your soul matters, your life matters to me. Help us to learn how to best be the church in these trying and turbulent times. All this we ask in your name, dear Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.